So it was a shock to me when Paul Pecorelli was elected as NYSET vice president, almost, I would say, about 10 years ago. And I was scared because I knew what was coming down the pike as being vice president and treasurer and secretary prior to that. I knew that the natural progression of the offices would be for me to run for president. So with my family's blessing, I stepped up to the plate and was elected as the new PMCT president. I have to say that the presidents and the executive boards before me all set me up to be successful in this role. When I took office, it was a unique situation because not only was I a new PMCT president, but we also had a brand new superintendent coming on board, and we just recently helped to get elected 2 brand new Board of Ed trustees who were pro opting out. So that was a big, huge thing back in that time. I was optimistic at that point because prior to this whole change of guard, teachers were feeling really beaten up. Really, it was a negative atmosphere. It was a getcha gotcha atmosphere. Administration and teachers were on the opposite sides of the spectrum. And I was hopeful with a new superintendent and new board members that we could flip that around and both sets of leadership could work together to create a new positive environment. And in my opinion, that's exactly what happened. Teachers began to feel respected, their voices were heard, we were successful in negotiating a successor agreement that was fair and equitable. And finally, PMCT and the PatMed administration were once again working as a team and not against each other. Our Board of Ed supported parents and teachers in regards to the opt-out movement, and they were proactive, that current board, they were proactive in protecting teachers against harmful APPR. In March of 2015, PMCT and the community stood up for public education. And over 4,000 people from our community, surrounding communities, the educational community, attended our community forum that was called Our School, Our Community, Our Voice. And it was just an incredible moment. PMCT led the way for other districts to follow with other rallies and forums. We spoke out against the unfair testing, abusive APPR, and the impact the abusive testing had on our students. We spoke out for parental rights. We spoke out against that harmful APPR piece. And Albany heard us, and we were effective in making changes. And it's really hard to explain the feelings that I, as a president, and the executive board had, because we pulled off something so monumental. I mean, we shut down Sunrise Highway. It was that crazy. It was crazy good. Like, we hadn't seen something like that in such a long, long time. And I never, ever would have been able to pull it off as a president of PMCT without Kevin Toolin being by my side. We worked together and thought about how we could, what was the next step and the what ifs. What if this happened? How could we prevent that from happening? So once we accomplished all of that and we were getting off on a good foot, that took a couple of years. That happened in 2015, but we were still like in that moment of that feel-good moment for a couple of years. And 2017 came along, and that's when the New York State Constitutional Convention was looming upon us. And as an executive board, we began to visit each of our school buildings and meet with our PMCT members and educate them on what the Constitutional Convention was and how, if that passed in New York State, how that would be detrimental to us as a profession. It was really very rewarding as a president, and I think also for the executive board, to meet with the membership and share that information in regards to the vote. And many people, didn't know. I myself needed to be educated. So talking to people about this convention was it was really worthwhile. We were able to meet with a lot of PMCT members at that point, and those face-to-face meetings were extremely crucial in helping to get our membership out to vote the Constitutional Convention down. And not only were we successful in that, but all the other local presidents of not just educational unions, but trades and whatnot, they were all impacted too. The police, the fire departments, everybody came together to get their membership out to vote this down, and we were successful. We overwhelmingly opposed the New York State Constitutional Convention. So just when we thought we could take a breath after doing all of that, along came Mark Janus. He, in addition to private corporations and hedge funders, made it their mission to weaken unions. So once again, the PMCT Executive Board and I began to visit each building to discuss the Supreme Court case, give them a little history on it, and then explain to them how a negative ruling on this court case could impact our livelihoods. And unfortunately, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Janus. This meant that the public sector unions couldn't require members to pay dues, and it also meant that we could have less of a voice at a negotiating table. Union members would have to consent to pay any type of dues. And if they chose not to, they would still be afforded all the rights that dues-paying members would receive. And this was just really just so unfair. And it frustrated those people who, were working hard and paying dues, and they understood the value of paying those dues. And it was frustrating to know that two of our members decided to be just like Mark Janus. So it was now my job to make sure that each PMCT member re-enrolled in the union. And with the help of the executive board, once again, we were able to do this. We had to go face-to-face to every single person and ask them to rejoin the union and enroll and sign an enrollment card. And then we had to collect those cards. And imagine doing that, 700 people. There, not only were we teaching all day, but then we had to ask people to take some time to meet with us after their workday to do this. Once those cards were then collected, we then needed to make copies of them for our record and for NYSET, but then the district also needed those records, and that all needed to be redacted. So that was a task in itself. It was just such a time-consuming process, but we did it. PMCT members believed how important it was to stick with the union. And if anything, that is a message that I think for the history of PMCT, you have to stick with the union. That's the message, and that's the message. You have to stick with the union. So we finally could take a breath after we dealt with the Mark Janus piece, or so we thought, and then the COVID-19 pandemic hit, and it spread rapidly throughout the world. And on March 15th, 2020, the Patchogue-Medford School District shut down. And Patchogue-Medford teachers did an incredible job preparing their students and themselves for the shutdown. They were amazing. They rallied to help their students, the students' families, and their colleagues. So much good came from that horrible time in history. And we shouldn't forget that. As tired as we were, as overwhelmed as we were, we need to remember all the good that came out of it. We really just had to learn new tricks of the trade. We were always, masters of everything. And now we had to reinvent a whole new piece of learning and teaching. Every day for me as a president was a new turn of events. I spent the majority of many of the days of the first 2 weeks of the shutdown for hours being on Zoom calls with NYSET leadership, with Patchogue-Medford School District leadership, just trying to iron out the protections for PMCT members to make sure that their rights weren't going to be violated with any new thought process of how new teaching and new learning and what new teaching and learning was going to look like. Just when we thought of everything, something else popped up. So, being a president, you always have to have that mindset of what if this happens? What if this happens? And I really feel that you have to help the membership be 2 steps ahead of where they're at that point. You know, and just at that time, some things were out of our control. We had to abide by whatever state ed and the governor had proposed or laid down as law at that time, or what they thought was appropriate. And it was a really difficult time to be in the role of a union leader. But as I said before about sticking with the union is a key thing. Through the years, I've been with the district for 33 years, and as I said before, I've held pretty much every single role from building rep all the way up to president. And I have to say that that's the message that has to come through to everyone, whether you're a first-year teacher or you're a 30-year veteran teacher. Sticking with the union has its values. And one constant struggle that I believe all of PMCT's presidents faced, or rather any union president has faced, was keeping the membership engaged. And we were always trying to find new ways to educate the membership on how important it was to be a part of the union. So many times it's forgotten that the actions of the union president or the executive board are for the greater good, not for an individual's gain or a small group of people's gain. It's for the greater good. And yes, we fight for the individual's rights or that small group of people, their rights. But it's the hope that when we're fighting for those rights, that the membership realizes that without a union, it could just be so much worse. And how important it is just to be involved, even if it's a small role, if it's a part of being, you know, some type of a membership activity, or it's attending a board meeting, or it's taking a seat on a committee, or maybe even accepting the role as a building rep. Becoming involved and being educated on those issues that involve the educational community is a key piece to being a teacher in this day and age. And sticking with the union is the key piece of it.